The problem started with a scream, then two screams. Then a man screamed, "Why is everyone screaming?" which caused three more people to scream in response. Within seconds, the royal courtyard had completely lost control of itself. A goose ran past like it had committed a crime. A noble fainted with the confidence of someone who had practiced fainting. Someone dropped bread. No one helped. And cutting cleanly through all of that chaos, a rotten apple flew through the air. Not gently, not respectfully, but with the kind of violent commitment that suggested it had been personally offended. Now pause. Because that apple? That apple is about to stop an assassination, trigger a prophecy, emotionally destabilize a king, and ruin one woman's life beyond repair. So if you're not subscribed, fix that immediately. Because what you're about to witness is not a story, it's a series of consequences. Wobblelina Gigglethud had one goal that morning. Mind her business. She failed before breakfast. Because the moment she stepped into the courtyard, she saw a guard being aggressively annoying, and Wobblelina had never, in her entire life, successfully ignored annoyance. "Move," the guard snapped, shoving a merchant aside like kindness had personally offended him. "Strike one." The merchant stumbled. "Strike two." The guard rolled his eyes. "Strike three." Wobblelina froze, not out of fear, out of decision-making, which was worse. "This," she muttered, picking up a slightly bruised apple from a nearby stall, "is not my fault." A woman beside her leaned away. "Are you about to do something stupid?" "No," Wobblelina said confidently. She threw the apple. Time slowed. Because of course it did. The apple spun through the air like it had ambition. The guard turned. The crowd inhaled. And from absolutely nowhere, a man stepped forward, quiet, hidden, deadly, an assassin. Wrong place, wrong time, extremely wrong apple. Thwack! The apple hit him directly in the face, hard, with intent, with absolutely no respect for his career choices. There was a pause. A long, confused, deeply uncomfortable pause. Then, the assassin blinked, wobbled, and something slipped from his sleeve. A dart, small, sharp, very poisoned, very important. It hit the ground harmlessly. The assassin followed, face first, defeated by fruit. Silence. Wobblelina blinked. "Oh." Then the courtyard exploded. "Assassin! The king! He was saved! Who did that?" Every head turned, slowly, together, with terrifying unity, on toward Wobblelina Gigglethud, who was now standing there, empty-handed, full of regret. "This," she said immediately, raising both hands, "is not my fault." No one believed her. From the center of the courtyard, the atmosphere shifted, heavy, sharp, annoyingly dramatic. A man stepped forward, tall, dangerous, built like authority and bad decisions. King Tyrannicus Grumblemaw the overdramatic, alive, because of her. Unfortunate for everyone involved. His gaze locked onto her. Slow, intense, like he was trying to decide if she was a threat or a problem. "You," he said. Wobblelina pointed at herself. "Me? You threw that." She looked at the unconscious assassin, at the fallen dart, at the apple-shaped destruction. "I committed a fruit-based crime," she said carefully. "Not a miracle." A woman dropped to her knees. "Oh, divine forces!" Another followed immediately. "She has been chosen." A third fainted with emotional dedication. Wobblelina looked around. "Why are they kneeling?" No one answered, because they were too busy kneeling. The king stepped closer. "You disrupted an assassination." "I disrupted a man's face," she corrected, and then, like the worst possible timing in human history, a voice screamed, "It begins!" Everyone gasped. Someone cried. Someone else knelt harder. Wobblelina closed her eyes. "If this is destiny," she muttered, "I would like to unsubscribe." She opened them again. The king was still staring at her. Closer now, much closer. This felt like a problem. "You will come with me," he said. Wobblelina blinked. No. The guards moved. She pointed wildly at the unconscious assassin. Him. Arrest him. When he actually did something. No one moved, because apparently, throwing fruit had become a higher priority than attempted murder. Wobblelina inhaled slowly, deeply, like someone preparing for a lifetime of regret. This, she said as the guards closed in, is still not my fault. No one listened. And somewhere, in the collective imagination of the kingdom, a legend was born. A very powerful, very divine, very incorrect legend. As they dragged her toward the palace, one thought hit Wobblelina with terrifying clarity. She had just accidentally saved the most dangerous man in the kingdom, and judging by the way he was looking at her, he was not going to let her leave alive. Or worse, he was going to keep her. Wobblelina Gigglethud had been dragged many places in her life, out of arguments, out of markets. Once, briefly, but out of a bakery she still believed she was right about. But never, never had she been dragged into a royal palace like a suspicious object that might explode. This, she said for the 15th time, as guards escorted her down an unnecessarily long hallway, is not my fault. No one responded, which was rude. The palace was exactly as she expected. Large, polished, intimidating, filled with people who looked like they had never tripped over their own feet in their entire lives. Disgusting. They shoved open a pair of massive doors. Wobblelina stumbled forward and stopped. At the far end of the room, seated like he had been personally sculpted by intimidation itself, King Tyrannicus Grumblemaw, the overdramatic. He didn't move immediately, which somehow made it worse. He just watched her. The room was silent. Heavy. Was the kind of silence that made people confess to things they didn't even do. Wobblelina looked behind her, then back at him, then pointed at herself. Is this about the apple? No one laughed. This was a very humorless environment. The king leaned forward slightly. Slow. Deliberate. Like every movement needed to be respected. You stand before the throne, he said, voice low, controlled, unnecessarily intense, as the one marked by fate. Wobblelina blinked, then immediately shook her head. No. A guard inhaled sharply. Someone in the room dropped something out of shock. The king's eyes narrowed. No? No, she repeated more confidently now. I reject that. Silence. You reject fate? He asked. Yes, she said. Fate needs to mind its business. A court official choked. The king leaned back slowly, studying her, or like she had just said something deeply offensive or deeply interesting. Possibly both. You interfered with death, he continued, ignoring her rejection like it was a minor inconvenience. You disrupted what was meant to be. I disrupted a man's face, she corrected. We've been over this. Another silence. Longer this time. Heavier. More confused. Most people, when standing in front of the most dangerous man in the kingdom, tried very hard to survive. Wobblelina, unfortunately, tried very hard to be correct. Do you understand what you've done? The king asked. Yes, she said immediately. I threw an apple, poorly, his gaze sharpened. No. Yes, she insisted. It was not a good throw, I'll admit that. You saved my life. She paused, considered that, then shook her head again. No. The room collectively lost the will to function, and the king stood, slowly, deliberately, with the kind of presence that suggested entire armies had regretted standing where she was currently standing. He stepped down from the throne. One step, then another, each one louder than necessary. Wobblelina did not move, not because she was brave, because she was still processing how she got here. He stopped in front of her. Close. Too close, uncomfortably close. You stand before me, he said quietly, after saving my life, and you deny it. Wobblelina looked up at him. Very calm. Very certain. Yes. Another pause. Why? He asked. Because if I accept that, she said, gesturing vaguely at everything, this becomes my problem. The king stared at her. That was not the answer he expected. That, she added, and is not a responsibility I'm emotionally prepared for. Something flickered in his expression. Not anger, not quite amusement. Something worse. Interest. You are either, he said slowly, a threat or something far more dangerous. Wobblelina sighed. I am neither. I am leaving. She turned, took one step toward the door, did not make it to step 2. A guard blocked her path. She stared at him, then at the door, then back at the king. I was not asking, she said. You are not leaving, the king replied. She blinked. Ah. That was unfortunate. You have interfered with forces beyond your understanding, he continued. You have altered fate itself. I threw fruit, she said. You will remain here, he went on, completely ignoring her again, until I determine what you are. Wobblelina crossed her arms. But you could determine that now. And what are you? He asked. She met his gaze, completely unbothered. A mistake. Silence. Somewhere in the room, a servant dropped a tray. The king stared at her. Long. Hard, like he was trying to solve a problem that refused to behave logically. Most people feared him, respected him, obeyed him. This one argued with him, corrected him, denied reality to his face, and somehow had saved his life. You will stay, he said finally. Wobblelina exhaled slowly, deeply, like someone accepting their downfall. This, she said for what felt like the 100th time, is not my fault. No, the king said, watching her carefully. There was a pause, then, very quietly, very deliberately. It is mine. Wobblelina frowned. That sounds worse. He didn't explain, but because at that exact moment, he realized something deeply inconvenient. He didn't think she was a coincidence, and that was a problem. As Wobblelina was escorted out, still arguing with a guard about her right to leave, the king remained standing in the center of the room, unmoving, thinking, calculating, because if fate truly had marked her, then she wasn't just a problem. She was his. Wobblelina Gigglethud had made a decision, a very good decision, a smart decision, a decision rooted in survival, logic, and her deep desire to not be involved in whatever nonsense the palace was currently planning for her. She was leaving. Immediately, quietly, without permission. This, she whispered to herself, crouched behind a decorative pillar like a criminal with no plan, or is it still not my fault? It had been exactly 12 minutes since she was escorted out of the throne room. 12 minutes. And already, 2 servants had bowed at her. One guard had called her my Lady of Destiny and nearly cried. Someone had offered her a loaf of bread as tribute. She ate the bread. That part was unrelated. This place is unstable, she muttered. Step 1. Leave. Step 2. Never come back. Step 3. Pretend none of this happened. Simple, perfect, flawless, which is why she was currently sneaking down a palace hallway in the least subtle way possible. The palace, unfortunately, had stairs. Many stairs. Tall stairs. Suspiciously polished stairs. Wobblelina stopped at the top of one particularly long staircase and narrowed her eyes. I don't trust you, she told the stairs. The stairs, predictably, said nothing, or which made them more suspicious. She took one careful step, then another. Then, her foot slipped. Ah, she said calmly, then less calmly. Ah. Then with growing emotional awareness. Ah. And then gravity made a decision. Wobblelina did not fall. She descended. Violently. With momentum. With regret. If I die like this, she announced as she lost control of her entire existence, tell people I slipped heroically. She hit one step, then another. then several more in rapid succession. Her arms flailed, her dignity left her body, her life choices replayed briefly. And then, she wasn't on the stairs anymore. She was airborne. For a moment, just one deeply unfortunate moment, Wobblelina Gigglethud achieved flight. Then she crashed into something solid, very human, very important. There was a loud impact, a collective gasp, and suddenly, she was no longer falling alone, because she had just tackled King Tyrannicus Grumblemaw the Overdramatic directly out of his standing position. They hit the ground together, hard, unceremonious, highly illegal. Silence. Wobblelina blinked, slowly. Oh no! Above them, a loud cracking sound. Everyone looked up. The chandelier trembled, shook, detached. And then, it crashed down exactly where the king had been standing seconds ago. Glass shattered, metal snapped, the floor exploded into chaos. Silence returned, thick, heavy, absolutely judgmental. Wobblelina turned her head, very slowly, to look at the king beneath her. "This," she said, still lying on top of him like a mistake, "is not my fault." No one breathed. Across the room, Sister Calamity Whalebloom inhaled like she had just been personally summoned by drama itself. "But the descent!" she screamed. Everyone flinched. "The fall!" Wobblelina closed her eyes. "No. The divine collision. I slipped. She casts herself upon death and denies it. I fell downstairs." The priestess dropped to her knees, hard, committed, emotionally invested. "The goddess guides her body." Wobblelina pushed herself up slightly, looking down at the king. "I guided nothing," she said. "I saw my life flash." The king did not respond immediately. He was staring at her. Again. Close. Too close. This was becoming a pattern she did not support. "You fall," he said slowly, voice calm in a way that suggested something was deeply wrong. "And death follows." "I fall," she corrected, "and everything becomes worse." Another pause. "You moved me," he said. "I tackled you," she clarified. "Toward violently. You saved me." She stared at him, long, tired, unconvinced. "I didn't save you," she said. "I fell with purpose." That was not better. Around them, the room had fully descended into chaos again. People were whispering, pointing, kneeling. Someone was crying. A guard muttered, "Twice." Another whispered, "She's done it twice." Wobblelina froze. "No." The king slowly sat up. She immediately rolled off him like she had touched something politically dangerous. "This is escalating," she said. No one disagreed. Sister Calamity rose dramatically, eyes shining with the energy of someone who had just been proven right in the worst possible way. "The pattern reveals itself." "There is no pattern," Wobblelina snapped. "First the strike. It was an apple. Now the fall. It was stairs." The priestess pointed at her like she had personally offended destiny. "She does not act. She is moved." Wobblelina pointed back. "I was moved by gravity." The king stood, slowly, deliberately, unharmed. Again, everyone noticed. That was the problem. He looked at the shattered chandelier, then at her, then back again. "Twice," he said. Wobblelina took a step back. "No. You intervened twice. I slipped once and threw fruit once. You altered fate. I lost balance." Silence. They stared at each other. This was no longer a conversation. This was a disagreement with reality. Wobblelina exhaled sharply. "This," she said, gesturing at the destroyed chandelier, the kneeling crowd, the screaming priestess, and the deeply alive king, "work is becoming a pattern I do not consent to." No one cared, because the truth was simple, terrifyingly simple. She had tried to escape. Gravity had betrayed her, and somehow, she had saved him again. As the guards rushed in, as the priestess began chanting something that sounded legally binding, as the entire palace spiraled further into belief, Wobblalina realized something deeply upsetting. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was happening again. And if it happened twice, it could happen more. "No," she whispered. Because somewhere behind her, she could already hear someone say, "The prophecy has begun." Dinner was a mistake. Wobblalina Gigglethud knew it the moment she was escorted into a room filled with long tables, polished silver, and people who looked like they had never spilled anything in their lives. Untrustworthy people. "This," she whispered, as she was guided to a seat far too close to the head of the table, "is not my fault." No one responded. They never did anymore. Which was concerning. The royal dining hall was enormous. Golden chandeliers, endless plates, servants moving like silent ghosts of efficiency, and at the very center of it all, King Tyrannicus Grumblemaw the Overdramatic, alive, again, still, persistently. He was watching her. Of course he was. He was always watching her now, like she was either going to save his life, ruin his life, or trip into both simultaneously. Wobblalina sat down slowly, carefully, suspiciously. A servant placed a bowl of soup in front of her. It smelled expensive. She didn't trust it. Across the table, nobles whispered, not quietly, not subtly. "Or that's her, the one from the courtyard, and the fall. She touched the king." Wobblalina froze. "I tripped on him." No one corrected her, which meant the situation had already gotten worse. At the far end of the table, Sister Calamity Whalebloom sat upright, eyes gleaming like someone waiting for disaster to confirm her beliefs. Next to her, a thin man with sharp eyes, a tighter expression, and the aura of someone who had not trusted anything since birth. Cornelius Snooplethatch, royal advisor, professional suspicion specialist. He was not eating. He was watching. Specifically, he was watching Wobblalina. Good. At least someone here was reasonable. Dinner began. Servants poured drinks, plates shifted, utensils clinked. Everything was calm, controlled, normal, which meant something was about to go wrong. Wobblalina reached for her spoon, paused, looked at the soup again. "This feels like a trap," she muttered. Across from her, Cornelius leaned slightly forward, interested. "Do you often feel that way?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "Usually right before something becomes my problem." He hummed, suspiciously, then glanced at the king, then back at her, then at the soup, and somewhere in his mind, a very bad theory began forming. Wobblalina took a deep breath, picked up the spoon. "Nothing will happen," she told herself. She moved to take a bite, and then someone at the far end of the table gasped loudly for absolutely no reason. Wobblalina flinched, hard, her hand jerked, the bowl tilted, the spoon betrayed her, and the soup launched, directly, at the king. It hit him, squarely, completely, with heat, with force, with intent it did not have, for silence, total, absolute, devastating silence. Wobblalina froze, still holding the spoon, emotionally disconnected from her body. Oh no. Soup dripped, slowly, from the king's shoulder, his arm, his very offended existence. The entire table stopped breathing. Then, the king spoke. "You burned me." Wobblalina nodded immediately. "You're welcome." That was the wrong response. Several nobles gasped. One choked. Sister Calamity stood up halfway like she might ascend. Cornelius did not move. He was staring at the king's bowl, then at Wobblalina, then back at the bowl. Something clicked. "Don't," Wobblalina said, already sensing where this was going. "Whatever you're thinking, don't." Cornelius stood. Slowly, deliberately, like a man who had just solved something terrible. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "and do not consume the soup." Another silence. Wobblalina blinked. "Yes, good advice. I support that." The king frowned slightly, annoyed, burned, still dignified somehow. "Explain," he said. Cornelius gestured sharply. A servant rushed forward, examined the bowl, hesitated, then, very carefully, took a small sample. Everyone watched. The servant stiffened, then dropped the spoon. "Poison," he whispered. The room exploded. "Poison! The king! Another attempt!" Chairs scraped. Guards moved. Someone fainted again. Consistent behavior. Wobblelina stared at the bowl, then at the king, then at the soup currently covering him. Oh. Slowly, very slowly, every head turned, toward her, again. "This," she said immediately, raising her hands for what felt like the 1,000th time, "is not my fault." No one agreed, but Sister Calamity collapsed to her knees. "The third sign! No! The offering denied! I spilled! Death rejected! I panicked!" Cornelius stepped forward, eyes sharp, focused, terrifyingly calm. "No one," he said slowly, "is this incompetent by accident." Wobblelina pointed at herself. "I am." He ignored her. Of course he did. His gaze shifted between the poisoned soup, the king, Wobblelina. "First," he said, pacing now, "the projectile fruit. It was one apple, then the fall. I slipped, and now this. I flinched." He turned to her fully, eyes narrowing. "You consistently interfere at the exact moment required to prevent His Majesty's death." Wobblelina blinked. "That sounds worse when you say it like that." The king stood. Slowly. Soup still existing. Alive. Again. His gaze dropped to her. "But you acted without hesitation," he said. "I panicked with commitment," she corrected. "You placed yourself between me and death." "I threw liquid under pressure." Silence. Cornelius exhaled sharply, then snapped his fingers. "Bring me parchment." A servant ran. "What are you doing?" Wobblelina asked. "Understanding you," he replied. That sounded illegal. Minutes later, a board appeared, a very large board, and on it, notes, lines, connections. Cornelius began writing. "Apple to assassin, fall to chandelier, soup to poison." He connected them. Aggressively, Wobblelina stared. "That feels excessive." "It is incomplete," he said. "That is worse." He turned, eyes sharp, mind spiraling. "You are either," he said, "the most dangerous coincidence in recorded history." Wobblelina nodded. "Yes, I that one. Or something far more intentional." "No." He ignored her again. Of course he did. Behind them, Sister Calamity was now whispering to herself, fully consumed by prophecy. "The pattern grows. The pattern grows." Wobblelina looked at the king. Still alive. Still watching her. Still interested. This was escalating, rapidly. "This," she said, gesturing at the board, "the chaos, the poisoned soup, and the very living king, is getting out of hand." No one disagreed, because the truth was now unavoidable. 3 times. 3 separate disasters. 3 separate moments where everything should have gone wrong. And somehow, because of her, it didn't. "No," Wobblelina whispered, because she already knew what came next. Someone, somewhere, was going to say it. And right on time. Sister Calamity gasped. "The third confirmation." Wobblelina closed her eyes. Across the room, Cornelius added one final line to the board. "Pattern to intent." Then circled it. Hard. And for the first time, he smiled. That was the most dangerous development so far. Wobblelina Gigglethud did not trust the outdoors. This was a new development. Previously, she had not trusted. People, stairs, soup. Now she had added open spaces where things could explode. "This," she said, as she was escorted across the palace grounds, surrounded by an unnecessary number of knights, "is still not my fault." No one responded. Of course, they never did. Word had spread. Not normal word. Not reasonable word. But the kind of word that grew legs, developed a personality, and started making accusations. Servants bowed when she passed. Knights straightened like she might test them. One man dropped to his knees and whispered, "Protect us." "I am not protecting anyone," Wobblelina said firmly. "I am barely protecting myself." They nodded, like she had just said something deeply wise. This was getting out of control. At the center of the training ground stood King Tyrannicus Grumblemaw, the overdramatic. Alive? Again. Suspiciously consistent. Beside him, a massive black warhorse, tall, muscled, intimidating, the kind of horse that looked like it had opinions. Wobblelina stopped walking. "No," she said immediately. A knight blinked. "No." "What?" "No to whatever this is," she said, pointing at the horse. "I am not getting involved with that." "You will stand beside His Majesty," the knight said. "I will stand at a safe distance from His Majesty," she corrected. Too late. She was already being guided forward. Or the king turned as she approached. Of course he did. He always knew where she was, which was deeply inconvenient. "You have arrived," he said. "I was brought," she corrected. His gaze flicked briefly to the knights, then back to her. "You will remain near me," he said. "That has historically made things worse," she replied. He did not argue. Which was worse? The horse snorted, loud, judgmental. Wobblelina slowly turned her head. They made eye contact. "I don't like that," she said. The horse blinked. Once. Slowly. Then stepped closer. "No," she said again. "Stay where you are. We are not building a relationship." The horse ignored her. Of course it did. Across the field, knights began drills. Steel clashed. Orders were shouted. Everything was controlled, organized, predictable, which meant something was about to go very wrong. Wobblelina shifted slightly. Just slightly. Just enough to trip. "Ah," she said. Her foot caught on absolutely nothing, which was impressive. Her balance left her body, which was expected. And her hand reached out and landed directly on the horse. Not gently, not carefully, but with the full emotional force of someone trying not to meet the ground. The horse reacted immediately. It reared, high, violent, dramatic. Wobblelina screamed. The horse screamed. Several knights screamed internally. "I did not mean to touch you!" The horse bolted, fast, aggressive, committed to leaving, unfortunately. The king was still mounted, and now he was moving, rapidly, in the opposite direction of safety. "This is not my fault!" Wobblelina yelled, chasing after a situation she had already lost control of. Knights scrambled. Orders broke. Your everything collapsed into chaos. The horse charged forward, straight down the main path, and then the ground exploded. A deafening blast tore through the exact place they had been standing moments before. Fire, smoke, debris, shockwaves ripping through the air. Silence followed. Stunned, heavy, unavoidable. Wobblelina stopped running, slowly turned, and stared at the crater now occupying the path. "Oh." The horse slowed, then stopped. Perfectly fine. The king dismounted. Alive. Again. Of course he was. Every knight on the field froze. Then, slowly? They all turned, toward Wobblelina, who was now standing there, covered in dust, emotionally exhausted, deeply done. "This," she said, raising one hand weakly, "is not my fault." No one believed her. From the side, a heavy presence approached. Sir Bonkram Hardcheek, but he walked like a man who had never once slipped in his life, which made him suspicious. He stopped in front of her, looked at the crater, then at the horse, then at her. "You redirected the king," he said. "I startled a horse," she corrected. "You removed him from the blast zone. I panicked near an animal. You anticipated the attack. I tripped." A pause. Sir Bonkram nodded slowly. "Her power is subtle." Wobblelina stared at him. "My power," she said very clearly, "is panic." Behind them, the horse trotted over. Calm, relaxed, deeply unbothered. It stopped next to Wobblelina, then lowered its head slightly, respectfully. She froze. "No." The horse snorted softly. "I did not command the horse," she said immediately. "The horse made a decision." Several knights nodded. One whispered, "She speaks the language of beasts." "I do not!" Too late. The king approached, unharmed, again. His gaze moved from the crater, to the horse, to her. "You moved it," he said. "I touched it accidentally," she replied. "You acted at the precise moment required." "I lost balance near danger." Another silence. This was becoming a pattern. A very bad pattern. 4 times. 4 separate moments. 4 times he should have died. 4 times. He didn't. Because of her. Wobblelina exhaled slowly. No. Because she knew what this meant. She knew exactly what this meant. Behind her, a knight whispered. 4. Another said, "It's happening again." Wobblelina closed her eyes. As smoke continued to rise from the explosion, as knights secured the area, as Sir Bonkram watched her like she was a weapon. One thought settled heavily into Wobblelina's mind. This wasn't stopping. And if it happened again, she was never leaving this place. This is definitely not my fault. By the time the 5th incident began, Wobblelina Gigglethud had stopped expecting things to make sense. This was a mistake, because what happened next did not just ignore logic, it insulted it. The palace was tense, not normal tense, not something might happen, tense. But the very specific kind of tense that comes from 4 near-death experiences, one increasingly obsessed king, and an entire population that had decided Wobblelina was either divine or extremely committed to chaos. "This," Wobblelina said, being escorted down yet another hallway she did not approve of, "is escalating in ways I did not authorize." A knight beside her nodded seriously. As expected. That was not approval. Too late. Servants bowed as she passed. Guards stepped aside. Someone whispered, "That's her." Another whispered, "The 5th will reveal everything." Wobblelina stopped walking. No. But they kept walking, because apparently her opinions no longer mattered. At the far end of the corridor, King Tyrannicus Grumblemoth the overdramatic, alive, again, still, persistently refusing to die. He stood waiting, like this was planned, like he expected something. "I don't like this," Wobblelina said immediately. "You feel it as well," he replied. "No, I feel danger and poor decision-making." His gaze sharpened. "The pattern continues." There is no pattern. There was absolutely a pattern, but somewhere behind them, a door creaked open. Soft, careful, wrong. Wobblelina turned slightly, not because she was alert, because she heard something. A flicker of movement, a shadow where there shouldn't be one, and then a man stepped out, fast, silent, armed, an assassin. Again. "Oh, come on," Wobblelina said. The assassin moved, straight for the king. Everything happened at once. A guard shouted. Steel rang. People moved too slowly. Wobblelina panicked, which, historically, had consequences. She stepped back. Her foot caught on absolutely nothing. "Ah," she said. She started to fall. Again. "This is not my fault." Her arms flailed, wild, uncontrolled, emotionally committed. And then, her hand hit something. A table, on the table. Objects. Useless objects. Decorative objects. And one, very real, very sharp, but very unfortunately placed. Knife. She grabbed it, not intentionally, not skillfully, but with the full panic of someone trying not to collapse into the ground. "I don't even know where the knife came from." And then, she threw it. Not aimed, not directed, not planned. She was falling. The knife left her hand. Time slowed. Because apparently that was her life now. The knife spun. Once, twice, it hit a pillar, clanged, changed direction, hit a shield, bounced again, hit a decorative statue. At this point, physics should have stopped participating, but it didn't, because the knife adjusted. Mid-air, like it had opinions, and then it struck, directly, cleanly, perfectly. The assassin dropped. Immediately. Silence. Complete. Total. Emotionally devastating silence. Wobblina hit the ground. Hard. Ow. No one moved. No one breathed. Every single person in that hallway turned toward her. Again. This, she said weakly, still on the floor, is not my fault. No one believed her. From the far end of the corridor, a sound, a gasp, a dramatic inhale of pure, unfiltered validation. Sister Calamity Whalebloom. She has ascended. No, she does not aim. I didn't. She allows Destiny to aim. Destiny needs supervision. The priestess dropped to her knees. Again, harder this time. The fifth sign, the words echoed. Fifth. Everyone heard it. Everyone felt it. Because now, there was no denying it. 5 incidents. 5 impossible survivals. 5 times death had been redirected. Wobblina pushed herself up slowly, looked at the knife, then at the assassin, then at her own hands. Or no. Across from her, the king stood, unharmed, again. His gaze was not confused anymore. It was certain. You did not hesitate, he said. I was falling. You struck without aiming. I lost control. You moved with purpose. I disagreed with gravity. Silence. Then, a voice from the crowd. Soft, certain, terrifying. She meant to do that. Wobblina turned, slowly. No. Another voice. She calculated the angles. I did not. A third. She used the environment. I tripped into the environment. Too late. They had decided. The worst kind of decision. Sir Bonkram stepped forward, studied the scene, the angles, the impossible path of the knife. Remarkable, he said. Wobblina stared at him. No. Behind them, Cornelius Snooplethatch appeared, eyes bright, board already in hand. He added a new line. But knife, impossible trajectory. Then connected it to everything else, hard, aggressively. Wobblina watched in horror. This is getting out of control. No one disagreed, because the truth was no longer avoidable. It wasn't coincidence. It wasn't luck. It wasn't panic. It was something worse, something consistent, something inevitable. 5 times. She had saved him. Wobblina exhaled slowly, deeply, like someone accepting the collapse of reality. This is still not my fault. No one listened. As the guards dragged away the assassin, as the priestess began chanting something dangerously confident, as Cornelius smiled like a man who had proven something terrible. The king stepped closer. Very close. And for the first time, there was no doubt in his voice. You are not leaving, he said. Wobblina froze. But because this time, it didn't sound like an order. It sounded like a decision, and that was worse. It began with a title. It should have stopped there. It did not. Her divine catastrophe of unintended salvation. Wobblina Gigglethud stopped mid-step. No. The man announcing it did not stop. Blessed protector of his howling majesty. No. Chosen vessel of the uncoordinated path. I reject all of this. Too late. The palace had decided. After 5 separate, increasingly unreasonable incidents where the king did not die, Wobblina was no longer a problem, a witness, or a person with rights. She was now a concept. This, Wobblina said, as someone bowed so hard they nearly met the floor emotionally, is not my fault. No one listened, because titles were still happening. Or she who stumbles and death follows. That sounds threatening. She who panics and fate corrects. That sounds worse. At the front of the hall, glowing with the energy of someone thriving in chaos. Sister Calamity Whalebloom. This is the era of revelation, she declared. The divine Oops walks among us. Wobblina turned slowly. I am not walking, she said. I am trying to leave. No one allowed that, because now, everywhere she went, people followed. Servants bowed. Knights stepped aside. Nobles whispered like she might accidentally bless them. and more importantly, they brought things. Food. So much food. Bread. Fruit. Pastries. Entire meals placed gently in front of her like offerings to a being that might accidentally destroy them if not properly fed. Wabulina stared at the growing pile. What is all this? A servant bowed deeply. Tributes, my lady. She blinked. For what? For your protection. She looked at the food, then at the servant, then back at the food. I accept, and then... She ate it, immediately, because priorities. Across the room, a noble whispered in awe. She consumes the offerings. Another nodded. As expected. Wabulina paused mid-bite. It's bread. No one corrected her. This was her life now. Everywhere she went. People bowed, people whispered, people handed her food. This is not worship, she said firmly, chewing. This is catering. No one argued. At the far end of the hall, Cornelius Snooplethatch stood before his board. It had grown, larger, more complicated, more concerning. Strings connected everything. Notes overlapped. Words like intentional chaos. The controlled outcome, unknown force. Her? He circled something aggressively. Wabulina pointed at it. That feels illegal. It is necessary, he replied. It is not. He ignored her. Of course he did. Across from him, Sir Bonkram Hardcheek stood like a man who had fully accepted something life-altering. She does not act, he said. She influences. I trip, Wabulina corrected. She redirects fate. I inconvenience reality. He nodded. Like that confirmed everything. This was exhausting. And then... The doors opened. The room shifted. Because King Tyrannicus Grumblemaw the Overdramatic entered. Alive. Again. Still. Wabulina watched him approach. Suspicious. Tired. Holding bread. He stopped in front of her. Looked at the offerings. Then at her. You accept their devotion. I accept their food, she corrected. And to pause. If I'm divine, she added, gesturing at the entire situation, why am I still hungry? No one answered, because that was not a question they were prepared for. The king studied her. Long, carefully. You do not deny it anymore, he said. She blinked. I deny everything, she replied. Constantly. Yet you remain. I am being followed. Yet you accept what is given. I am not rude. Silence. He stepped closer. You stand at the center of every impossible outcome, he said. You reshape what should be. I ruin what should be, she corrected. Another pause. Then, very clearly, very firmly. I am not a goddess, Wabulina said. The room held its breath. She gestured at herself. At the food, at the board, at the kneeling people, at the entire ridiculous situation. I am a situation. No one disagreed. It was because that was the most accurate thing anyone had said all day. Behind her, someone whispered, The divine situation. Wabulina froze. No. Too late. They were writing that down, as more offerings were placed before her, as new titles were whispered into existence, as the palace fully surrendered to the idea of her. Wabulina realized something deeply, deeply upsetting. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't going away. She had accidentally saved the king 5 times. And now, the entire kingdom belonged to the idea of her. This is still not my fault. The problem was not the assassins. The problem was not the prophecy. The problem was not even the fact that Wabulina Gigglethud had become a walking religious event. The problem was the king. That specifically, King Tyrannicus Grumblemaw the Overdramatic had started showing up. Everywhere. Wabulina turned a corner. He was there. She entered a hallway. He was already standing at the end of it like he had been waiting for dramatic effect. She sat down to eat, her offerings, obviously. He appeared, sat across from her, watched her chew. This, she said, not looking up from her food, is concerning behavior. You are avoiding me, he replied. I am surviving you. He did not accept that. Of course he didn't. Because lately, he had developed a habit, a very specific habit. He kept seeking her out, not for strategy, not for answers, not even for the whole "you keep preventing my death" situation. No, he kept showing up to talk. Wobbelina did not support this development. She stood up immediately. And I have to go. You just sat down. I have somewhere else to be. Where? She paused, considered. Not here. She walked away, fast, purposefully, with the energy of someone escaping emotional danger. He followed. Of course he did. You evade every conversation, he said. I select peace. You avoid me. I avoid problems. Another pause. That is what I said. They walked in silence for a moment. Then, I do not understand you, he said. Wobbelina stopped, turned, looked him directly in the eyes. That is correct. That did not help him. At all. Because the truth was, he did not understand her. Everyone else feared him, obeyed him, respected him. Wobbelina, she argued with him, corrected him, walked away from him mid-sentence. And somehow, that was worse, because she also did not treat him like a king. You do not fear me, he said. Wobbelina nodded immediately. I fear everything equally. That was not reassuring. He stepped closer. Of course he did. He always did that. You stand before me without hesitation. I hesitate internally. You speak without caution. I regret everything immediately after. Silence. This was not how conversations with him usually went. He was used to control, to obedience, to certainty. She offered none of that. And yet, she was always there. At the exact moment things went wrong. Saving him, refusing credit, refusing him. That part was becoming a problem. You do not seek favor, he said slowly. I seek survival. You do not use your position. I did not ask for this position. You do not take advantage. I do not understand what is happening. Another pause, when something shifted. Not in the room. In him. Because for the first time, this was not about survival, or fate, or patterns. This was something else, something worse. You do not choose me, he said. Wobbelina blinked. What? The air went still. That was not a normal statement. That was not a safe statement. That was a dangerous direction. I am not an option, she said carefully. You are, he replied. No, she said immediately. I am a situation. That is what makes you one. That is not how that works. Silence. Wobbelina took a step back, then another. I think this conversation is becoming a problem. It already is, he said. That was worse. She turned, started walking, fast. If you develop feelings, she called over her shoulder, not looking back, or that is between you and your poor decisions. He did not respond, which was unusual. Wobbelina slowed slightly, just slightly, then stopped, because she could feel it, that gaze. She turned. He was still there, still watching her, but not like before, not calculating, not analyzing, something else, something far more inconvenient. No, she said quietly, because she recognized that look, and she did not have the emotional capacity for it. At all. Behind her, a servant whispered, He looks at her differently. Another nodded. It has begun. Wobbelina closed her eyes. This is not my fault. No one listened. Because across the courtyard, King Tyrannicus Grumblemaw the Overdramatic stood still, unmoving, but completely certain of one thing for the first time since she appeared in his life. This was no longer about survival, and that made it far more dangerous. Because now, he wanted something. And for the first time, it wasn't just to stay alive. It was her. The palace had never been this quiet, not normal quiet, not everyone is sleeping quiet, but the kind of quiet that meant something had been planned, something had been timed, and something was about to go very, very wrong. Wobblelina Gigglethud noticed immediately, which was unfortunate. "No," she said under her breath, because she had learned something important over the past few days. When things got quiet, things got worse. "This," she muttered, already turning around, "is not my problem." She took one step, then another, then immediately changed direction. And because she was leaving, not walking away, not politely exiting, leaving fast. Behind her, guards stood at their posts, too still, too focused, too prepared. Wobblelina narrowed her eyes. "I don't like this." From the far end of the courtyard, King Tyrannicus Grumblemaw the Overdramatic. Of course, standing exactly where danger would logically happen. She turned the other way. No. She was not getting involved. Not again. "I have done enough," she whispered. 5 is a solid number, very complete, very finished." She took another step toward freedom. And then, everything happened at once. A whistle cut through the air, sharp, precise, deadly, from the rooftops. Movement. Shadows dropped. Figures emerged. Weapons flashed. Assassins. Not one. Not two. Too many. "Oh, come on," Wobblelina said. But the guards reacted instantly. Steel clashed. Orders were shouted. The courtyard exploded into controlled chaos. This was not random. This was organized, planned, precise, and very, very dangerous. Wobblelina took one step back. "No," she said firmly. "I am not doing this again." She turned and ran immediately because survival. "I am removing myself from the situation." That was the plan. It was a good plan. It lasted 3 seconds. Her foot caught. Of course it did. "Ah," she said, and then she tripped, violently, directly into a pressure plate. There was a click, a very important click. Wobblelina froze. "No." Across the courtyard, several assassins also froze, because they heard it too. The first trap triggered. Arrows shot out from hidden mechanisms. Fast, sharp, unavoidable. Except, they didn't hit the king, they hit the assassins. Several dropped instantly. Silence. Then, chaos. "What? The traps? Who triggered?" Wobblelina was still on the ground, processing. "I did not mean to do that." Too late, because now, everything was reacting. She scrambled to her feet, took one step, slipped again. "This is not my fault." Her arm hit a nearby weapons rack. Swords fell, spears shifted, a shield dropped, and rolled, down the courtyard, directly into another group of assassins, taking out 2, then 3, then more as they stumbled over each other trying to recover. "This is not strategy," Wobblelina said, staring at the unfolding disaster. Another explosion went off, triggered by something she had absolutely stepped on earlier. More assassins went down. Guards stared. Frozen. But because this was not combat. This was consequences. Wobblelina turned, tried to run again, ran straight into a table, knocked it over. Food, plates, and very unfortunate objects scattered, including another knife. "No," she said immediately. Too late. Her hand hit it. It launched, not aimed, not controlled. It bounced, once, twice, then hit a rope. The rope snapped. A suspended structure collapsed, directly onto a cluster of assassins. Silence. Total. Wobblelina stood in the center of it all, breathing heavily, surrounded by destruction. "I survived by making things worse." No one disagreed, because it was true. Everything she touched got worse for everyone else. Across the courtyard, the king stood, unharmed. Again. Of course he was. Around him, every assassin had been, taken down incapacitated or extremely regretting their life choices, and Wobblelina had caused all of it, without trying. She turned slowly, looked at the guards. "This is not strategy," she said. A pause. This is consequences. No one corrected her, because there was no argument. Behind her, a voice, soft, reverent, terrifying. She has unleashed it, another. This is her true power. Wobble-Lena closed her eyes. No. Too late, because this was the worst one yet. Not one moment, not one accident, but a chain, a sequence, a disaster, all connected, all caused by her. As the last of the assassins fell, as the courtyard slowly returned to stunned silence, as every single person stared at her like she had just rewritten reality, Wobble-Lena realized something she could not deny anymore. This was not stopping. This was not accidental anymore. Not to them. And worst of all, across the courtyard, the king was walking toward her. Not confused, not uncertain. Certain. That was the real problem. The courtyard looked like a disaster had developed a personality and made decisions. Broken stone, collapsed structures, weapons scattered like bad ideas, unconscious assassins arranged in what could only be described as accidental organization, and in the center of it all, Wobble-Lena Gigglethud, standing, breathing, alive, unfortunately. This, she said, turning slowly in a full circle to take in the absolute destruction she had just created by existing, is not my fault. No one responded, but because no one, not a single person, believed her anymore. The guards stood frozen. The nobles stared. The servants looked like they had just witnessed a divine event and were emotionally adjusting. And then, one person knelt, then another, until the entire courtyard, full of trained soldiers, respected officials, and people who should have known better, dropped to their knees. Wobble-Lena froze. No. From somewhere in the crowd, a voice trembled. She has done it again. Another. She protects him. Another. She cannot be stopped. Wobble-Lena raised both hands immediately. I am not doing anything. Too late, because this was no longer belief. This was devotion. Full, complete, deeply unreasonable devotion. At the edge of the courtyard, Sister Calamity Whalebloom stood like she had been waiting her entire life for this exact level of chaos. The 5 have been completed, she screamed. Wobble-Lena pointed at her. No. The pattern is whole. I fell. The protector has ascended. I tripped. No one listened. They never did. And then, the crowd shifted, because someone was moving, slowly, deliberately, toward her. King Tyrannicus Grumblemaught the Overdramatic, alive, again, still, of course. He walked through the chaos like it belonged to him, like it always had, like it always would, until he stopped, right in front of her. Wobble-Lena did not move, not this time, because running had not worked, avoiding had not worked, denying had definitely not worked. This, she said quietly, is still not my fault. I know, he replied. She blinked. What? That was new. The courtyard held its breath. You saved me 5 times, he said. Wobble-Lena nodded immediately. By accident. Yes. That was not the argument she expected. Silence. You interfered with death, he continued. I inconvenienced it. You altered fate. I tripped aggressively. A pause. Then, he stepped closer. You stayed. Wobble-Lena frowned. I was detained. You did not leave. I tried. You returned. I fell back. Silence. This was not a debate anymore. This was something else, something worse. The king looked at her. Not like a ruler, not like a man calculating survival, but like someone who had made a decision. A very bad decision. You do not fear me, he said. I fear everything equally, she replied. Or you do not worship me. I barely tolerate you. A pause. Then, something shifted. The air changed, because suddenly, he moved. Not forward, down. The entire courtyard gasped, because King Tyrannicus Grumblemaught the Overdramatic knelt directly in front of her. Wobble-Lena's soul left her body briefly. No. Around them, chaos. People gasped, people cried, someone fainted with renewed purpose. Sister Calamity screamed something incomprehensible and possibly permanent. Wobblelina pointed at him. You need to stand up. No. That is incorrect. He looked up at her. Calm, certain, unreasonable. Do it again, he said. She blinked. What? Stay. Silence. Wobblelina stared at him, then laughed. Once, short, sharp, unbelieving. This feels like a legally binding mistake. No one disagreed. And you saved me 5 times, he repeated. By accident. Then do it again. That is not how that works. Stay. She looked around, at the kneeling crowd, at the destroyed courtyard, at the people who had fully lost their grip on reality, at the king, still kneeling, still certain. This was happening. This was actually happening. Wobblelina exhaled slowly, deeply, like someone standing on the edge of a very bad decision. This, she said for what felt like the last time, is not my fault. No one listened, because it didn't matter anymore. The kingdom had decided. The king had decided. And now, the only person left to decide was her. But Wobblelina Gigglethud stood in the center of a kingdom that believed she was divine, staring down at a king who had just proposed like it was a battlefield decision, and realized if she said yes, everything would get worse. If she said no, everything would get worse. I need better options. And that, dearest listeners, is how a woman who couldn't mind her business accidentally overthrew logic, offended physics, traumatized assassins, and got proposed to by a king who refuses to die. 5 saves, 0 intention, maximum consequences. Wobblelina Gigglethud did not become a legend. She became a problem people started worshipping. To this day, historians still argue, was she chosen by fate? Was she guided by destiny? Was she a divine protector sent by higher powers? Wobblelina, somewhere in the palace, or still covered in crumbs and poor decisions, has a different answer. I slipped, repeatedly. The king, unfortunately, disagrees. And the kingdom? They've already built a holiday around her, so if you ever find yourself throwing fruit at the wrong time, falling in the wrong direction, or accidentally saving someone important, just remember, it only takes one mistake to become a legend you never asked for. And if a king ever kneels in front of you and says, stay, run, unless you trip first, which, statistically speaking, you will.